Hein Brandt. I was former CEO of ING Real Estate until the 1st of Jan, and now I'm an independent consultancy, and I'm a member of several supervisory boards.
Great, thank you.
Jaap van Rijn, I'm CEO of the Netherlands of College Internationals.
My name is Maart Vermeulen. I'm a Regional Managing Director for RICS in Europe, Russia and CIS. And what we try to achieve is basically integrity, transparency and professionalism in markets worldwide.
Paul.
Paul Wessels, I'm a co-founder of PropertyNL, and I'm heavily involved in making the market more transparent in a research role. And I'm very excited about the next step we're taking.
Okay, good. Jan Willem.
Jan Willem de Graaf. I'm CTO of Property and the father of Ventu.
The father, I like the fact that it's already a person in its own right. I think that's good. We've been talking about placemaking here and creating new generations, so I'm glad that we've got one created. What I'd like to do is maybe start with you, Martin, because the RICS particularly has had a focus on transparency in the market and how that can help both investment within a country, but also particularly for investment across border, creating standards, creating more transparency. How important do you see data in general within that transparency and also these kinds of initiatives to create more transparency in the region?
Yeah, I think, Richard, it's clear. Talking about what we try to achieve as RICS, transparency in markets, property markets worldwide, I think this kind of initiatives you can only embrace. Having said that, of course, the quality needs to be right, the systems need to be ethical, integer as well. So from that perspective, well, we have some demands about how it's being operated, but in general, initiatives like this, fantastic.
Okay, good. And Jaap, I just wanted to speak to you. Obviously, as a broker, reliable data, very useful for you. Are there any risks associated with that? Are there fears that more transparency will create issues for the brokers, or do the brokers generally welcome that and see that this is actually going to be encouraging more investment?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of broker you are. For, let's say, lazy brokers, it's a more difficult world with more transparency. But if you want to be a broker and understand your client better and then help him from that respect, so to be a deal maker as well as a consultant, then a new website like Ventu is of great help. So it's more that you are able to develop a vision and not that your fee relates strongly simply to information what you have and others don't.
Okay, good. Paul, just coming to you, you've obviously been involved through PropertyNL, through the start of PropertyEU as well, and that has a strong research background. We've obviously got Petra here as well. How important is that depth of research in terms of helping to bring clarity to the market, both in terms of a publication but also in terms of data? How important is that sort of depth of knowledge and research?
I think quality of data, of research is essential to create something worthwhile for the market. So, for instance, if you look at the initiative we're launching here at Provada, Ventu, I mean, the quality of the data, the fact that you have unique data linked to information about supply in the Netherlands, that's essential. And that has been, let's say, the challenge of PropertyNL, PropertyEU in the last 15 years, and now it follows up into Ventu.
I mean, an interesting, Hein, it'd be interesting to come to you on this as well. Obviously, I can see that there's a massive advantage for investors, both local and national investors, if you've got data that you can rely on when you're looking at a building, when you're thinking about investing. You can look and see what's happened around the buildings around that, what's interesting in that specific building. Coming from a finance point of view, how important is it for you as well as for the investors?
I would say key. If I compare Ventu, let's say, with other systems worldwide, I had been working worldwide. I think this is a pretty advanced system nowadays. So not only as an investor, it is, let's say, unique that if you want to invest in the Netherlands, you have a system where you're able to look at. But also as a banker of finance, let's say, of course you have your own brokers, but let's say as a double check or compare things, it's pretty unique, you know. And of course, all depends how reliable we are, if everyone want to participate. But for, let's say, a banker as an investor, it is a unique proposition here in the Netherlands. And hope, it's my personal hope, that we can spread the whole system throughout Europe, because that will be unique. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And Martin, from your point of view, I mean, that's an interesting point that Heine's brought up there, is because there really isn't anything that provides transparency on a pan-European basis. Do you think this is a crazy dream of Hein, or do you think there's a demand for it and that this is actually a practical possibility if, for example, the brokers join in on this across a pan-European basis? Would it be valuable?
I certainly think it's valuable. It's indeed still a dream, but I think it can come true, in all honesty. Having said that, also looking at capital cash flows across the world, they increase more and more. So from that perspective, a cross-border solution will be needed going forward.
Okay, good. So it turns out that it may not be a crazy idea, Hein, and I like that.
Hopefully,
that's good. Hopefully. Good. And in terms of working together, I mean, Jaap, obviously, a lot of the time the brokers are competing with one another, but plainly for us to get this level of transparency, the brokers have to work together. How practical do you think that is on a pan-European scale? Is it something that you would welcome?
I think it's quite a challenge on a European scale, because not all markets are so much into transparency as the Dutch market. So I think, well, we can here compare ourselves, for instance, good with the UK, which is also quite transparent. But I think the Germans have a different tradition in that respect. So I think this starts somewhere, and for me it's just a good challenge to be more professional in, let's say, helping your client than only getting paid for information. So I think this is a step forward, and well, I think that can also be helpful in other parts of Europe as well.
I mean, it's an interesting point, that about professionalization, because when you look at, let's say my background was originally also at Euromoney, where real estate was viewed as something of a closed book as against equities and bonds, which were transparent, very clear. You're obviously keen at the RICS as well, Martin, in terms of professional standards. Do you think this kind of professionalization, these kind of tools will help that? And is that something that you should therefore, coming on from Jaap's point, is you should encourage your German RICS members to embrace?
Certainly that's the case. I think we are at the start of a trend that we can't stop, basically. And from that perspective, yeah, it's better to embrace than to fight. Okay, good. And Jan Willem, just coming to you, you were the father of it. I won't go into details about how that part of it happened. But when this child was there, what were you looking for? Let's say he's grown up today. What are your hopes for the product? What are the things that you think are special about it?
There are a number of things, Richard. What we see in the Netherlands is that the market is extremely splintered. So there are more than 2,000 real estate brokers working on commercial real estate in the Netherlands only. And what you will see is that a lot of the local knowledge of local players will be needed to get real estate transactions going. And the contacts for international will need a platform for communicating information cross-border, and the transparency will create a lot of new opportunity for brokers internationally, and it will give a good insight for investors of where to invest and how to invest in which building. And that is really the dream that I have, that in a number of years we will have that information going as a flow through Europe.
Okay, good. And I think the point about fragmentation is very interesting because, yeah, in a lot of ways at the moment, you've got the investment. The investment side, you've got the listed investment side, you've got the brokerage side, not fragmenting at all, but actually coming together. You've got mergers happening. You've got the listed sector REITs buying one another. You've got the DTZ merge with Cushman's. You've got, So do you think that this fragmentation is actually going to start moving in the opposite direction, and gradually we won't have 2,000, but we'll have 10. We might have some niche players, but we'll have a lot of big players rather than this fragmentation?
Well, what I expect to happen is that you will have more local specialized advisors and then the international advisors, and there's not much in between. So you're either internationally connected or you're a specialist in your region, and that's what we see happening. And I think if you look at the market share of the top 4 in real estate advisory, they only have worldwide 10% market share. So that will not develop like it is with the big 4 in accountancy that have now 60% of the market. But you see there an enormous potential of growing if you are international connected. Okay, good. And Martin, we picked up as well that some countries have different ideas on transparency. How do you think you can begin to make a change? For example, you're also in charge of CIS and Russia, a less transparent market. How do you begin to bring transparency through and make it across the whole market?
If you look at, in particular, the region you just touched upon, Richard, it's very clear. All those people are longing for international capital as well. And if you want to attract international capital, it's very important to offer security to those investors. And security comes with transparency and governance. So from that perspective, if those countries want to open up, want to become attractive for international investors, they need to comply with international standards and legislation and transparency. Okay, good. And Hein, you were obviously operating across lots of different areas. When you were looking at these other kind of data sources, were there things that you particularly wished for? And has Jan Willem got to go further in order to create and build this further to create exactly what you wanted? Yeah. Or is that already here? Where are we at the moment with Ven2?
But this is exactly what we want as international lenders or as international bankers. The problem, however, is that the banking system is not totally aligned with your system sometimes. So we need to combine that going forward, otherwise it won't work.